Hi, everyone. I'm Artie Merritt. For this episode, we're going to talk about chatbots in the banking industry, and we have a great panel here, folks from Finn, TD, Ameritrade, and RBC. So we want to start with quick intros. So perhaps we can start with Angela, if you want to give a quick intro.
I knew you were going to call me first. So I'm Angela. I work for TD Ameritrade. I'm a senior manager of strategic partnerships and emerging products. My focus area is on Asia and the Asian diaspora and the US. My products are in WhatsApp and WeChat for Hong Kong, US, Singapore, and mainland. And what we're really looking to do is to extend the TD Ameritrade brand and presence and make it accessible for the Chinese consumer, and also help to build education and financial literacy for them, as well as provide customer service.
Great. Perhaps Jake, if you want to.
Yeah, sure thing. I'm Jake. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of a company called Finn.ai. We're a specialist in AI-powered self-service for banks and credit unions. So our mission is to help financial institutions scale convenient self-service to improve their member experience. So we're based out of Canada. We work primarily in North America, but we also have some bots deployed in Europe, in Latin America, and in Africa.
Great. And how about Zach?
So, hi everyone. My name is Zach Fejes. I am the team lead for the Voice Lab at RBC, which is a relatively small team. We operate within the broader mandate of technical innovation within the organization. And we focus very directly on novel technologies, novel use of technology, as well as best practices for voice applications, but more broadly, conversational assistants, which sort of find themselves in place in voice bots, whether it's on something like smart speakers or on mobile channels. And we tend to work with different units within our broader organization to inform and guide on some of those technical decisions, architectures, and practices.
Great. So I appreciate you guys doing this. How about just to get started, we talk about the reasons why a bank is building chatbots, like what's the reasons or use cases, and maybe Zach, just because you just went, if you might want to start with it, some of the reasons that RBC is building chatbots and voice skills.
So I think that for all of the financial institutions, I think it comes down to a couple of key things. The first and foremost is making sure we can give our clients and those who might potentially be clients a good experience working with our services. As a financial institution, we have no end of really useful and valuable services to provide, but getting new clients onboarded to those things, especially, as you can imagine, in times where people are going to branches a little less frequently because of COVID, and granted, we want everybody to be staying safe, we want to make sure we can provide the same quality of interaction for clients. Now, part of that is doable through fantastic design and web pages and the mobile app itself, but part of that we find is well facilitated by conversational interaction. There's a lot that can be weaned about what difficulties a client might be going through, what might be interesting them, or what they might be looking for, with more context extractable from it in a conversational interaction than might be if they were clicking through a web page. Plus, it helps them target the information they're looking for a lot faster. So there's a lot of value there. And part of that is in finding efficiencies for our clients. Part of that is in providing that type of service. The second reason I think that financial institutions look at conversational applications is honestly internal facing. It has to do with enabling our own employees, enabling our own capabilities so we can work faster, better, smarter, and use tools that really facilitate our work on the day-to-day. And that can be things like internal chatbots helping you find things. If it's voice assistants, it may be actual assistants or virtual assistants within meetings, depending on whether or not we're meeting virtually. There's a lot of really fantastic things in this space that unlock opportunities that just haven't existed in other technology spaces.
Yeah, no, that's actually really interesting. We hear quite a bit around efficiencies, and then it's neat hearing about the internal use too, because that also can help with efficiencies for the internal team members as well. How about Angela?
I completely agree with Zach, about the internal use cases. I think when you're looking at developing a use case and you're looking at how is this going to work operationally, right, for the enterprise, your associates are 1/3, if not half of the equation, because they're the ones who not only provide support or live agent support, but they also understand and know what it is that they're going through day to day and how these assistants are either helping relieve some of those tasks for them or how they're actually just completely changing the client experience and helping them have a better client, helping them provide a better client experience to people. So I think when we're looking at how do we start to form those use cases, it's really about taking into account all of the people at the party, which is the bot, the business, and the associates.
Fair enough. Are
Yeah,
you yeah.
Oh, sorry, go for it.
Oh no, that's just going to ask you, Jake. Are you seeing similar or any other use cases?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. You know, we focus a lot more on the end user, customer or member use case, but I think we're seeing a sort of generational shift from branch and then maybe phone into digital channels. And digital has lots of advantages there, which I'm sure we're all espousing, but also some challenges. We miss the personal relationship. There's a challenge around adoption just as a start. And the ability to just talk to somebody to get something done is really nice in those channels. Waiting on hold, you know, less nice. So I think chatbots can help to bridge some of the gap. They help to make digital channels easier to use. They can help FIs deliver self-service that is digital, personalized, and as easy to use as talking to someone. I think COVID really underlined this in many ways. You know, we saw a lot of disruption happen very quickly to branch and phone channels. It meant wait times, long wait times, and degraded service when people needed banks the most. So I think it underlined the case for very strong digital service within those channels.
Right, you both, actually, Zach and Jake mentioned some similar things around with COVID-19 and then sort of providing a similar service if people can't go into a bank. How are you taking into account things like personality when you're building these chatbots or voice interfaces that try to replicate some of that human interaction?
So if Jake, if you don't mind if I jump in on this, I think that in general, so actually let me rephrase this. The answer is yes, absolutely. But I think that it's also very interesting because it's very dependent on the type of application, the type of service that the people are looking to interact with, and the means by which they get there. Both Angela and Jake had mentioned actually the existence of these technologies in the broader scope of other channels of engagement. And I think that's very apt because we don't only have chatbots as a channel, for example, we do have digital, be that on mobile or on the web. And I think that leveraging each to its own benefit with the strengths of each of those channels kind of showcased and connecting cleanly with one another allows you to demonstrate that personality. And that could be personality from the perspective of a brand. You want to make sure that you're representing your brand through a conversational channel correctly. Just like we might have design guidelines for web or for mobile that include color scheme, that include the way documents should flow, the type of wording that should be used to appropriately represent the brand and the experience we want our clients to have. Conversation is no different. And in some ways, it's a little more complex because in many ways, you're dealing with the invisible aspects of design. You're dealing with word choice, certainly, but you're also dealing with prosody, which is all the, if you're talking about spoken language, all the spoken elements of speech that are not the words. It's your tone, your pitch, your pace. And in chatbots that don't necessarily have audio to rely on, word choice and pacing becomes paramount. And knowing how and what to respond to the client with also becomes paramount, because that's the difference between demonstrating the, let's say, caring of your brand or the personnel aspects you want to portray with the practicality of, right, but we do want to get our clients what they're looking for right away, as few clicks as possible, as few steps as possible. So it's an interesting balance, and it's definitely something that you can achieve. with chat as a channel, with voice as a channel. And I'll pass it over to Jake. I'd love to hear about your guys on this.
Yeah, maybe I'll provide the opposite view of, so I think you provide some great guidance on what good looks like. I can share a little bit, I think, on what we've seen bad look like. And that's too little care given to conversation design and to brand and tone. So trying to jam FAQ responses, for example, or web content or internal wiki content into a bot answer ends up like one of those very long text messages you probably get from your grandmother or something like that. So, and I think we've seen a lot of that. We continue to see a lot of it. I think design makes a very, very big difference to performance. People don't read long messages. So you might have the answer there, but no one's going to read it. Then they ask another follow-up question, and then we sort of, they start getting into error messages and things like that. So we've seen design be very, very important. And then brand and tone is another layer on top of that. And I think it is an area that people have underinvested in as an industry, I think.
Yeah, it can make it a bit more engaging. I know there's a banking chatbot that I've used. If you ask it something like, what's the weather? It'll say, it's always sunny when you're talking about finances. It still tries to add some, personality there. Are there certain use cases that financial institutions try to focus on, like things that work better for these conversational environments? I mean, maybe Angela?
I think, not to say it depends, but I think it really depends on your modality too. So in what I'm seeing, if you can't just say, oh, customer service is the use case for all chatbots, because yes, that's true, but how you provide it and ultimately what value it's trying to bring to our business lines, but our clients, changes, right? So if you take a look at anything, a simpler text bot like a WhatsApp integration versus like a Twitter or Facebook integration, you have considerable differences in just how it operates, how it works, what people expect. From long form images, rich media to just quick answers, right? In WhatsApp, for example, if you guys use it, I'm sure you do, you save things in there too. It kind of starts to become a little bit of I took pictures with my friends, or I got this link, or I got this information, versus a Facebook where you're looking at more of that carousel type interaction. So I think the modality is really important when you're thinking about the use case and how it's then going to apply to what you needed to do for your clients and for your business. But overall, yes, of course, we have all similar goals, right? We all want to provide good customer service and good client experience. We want to help with account opening and through processes that are annoying, or processes that tend to always kick to customer service. And those will always be the things that we want to make as simple and as enjoyable as possible. Maybe throw in some smiley faces if we can.
Are you seeing anything around transactions, like being able to complete a transaction or send money, those kind of things?
I think we do trade through our bots right now, which is really great. And we trade through our voice as well in our Alexa integration. I think trade is a hard thing to do because there's so many different kinds of trades you can execute on. So we've really simplified it down to the most simplest and the basic kinds that you can do. We also try to provide contextual definitions as you go, because I think that's something that if you're trading all the time, you forget, what a market order is or what a limit is and how that works. So at least we do our best to provide what those things mean as you go, as opposed to waiting for you to not be sure and then ask at the end of the transaction, and then you kind of have to start over again, because it's very linear in a conversational flow. But yes, transactions are something. Money transfers are a little bit more difficult for me in the space that I'm in, because I work in Asia, and we all know the political climate. So I'll leave it at that.
How about yourself, Jake or Zach? Do you see any use cases that work better?
Yeah, I can break out. So just at a very high level, I would say where we've seen success is, and I think where bots are successful just in general, is relatively simple, straightforward, repetitive stuff. I think that's the sort of bucket of things that we're putting bots against, and then freeing up agent time or human time to deal with the more complex stuff. And when we've spent a lot of time looking at call center data and chat log data, And what we see pretty much across the board is that low complexity, high frequency tasks and queries are what agents spend most of their time dealing with. So whether that's troubleshooting a lost password, or ordering new checks, or putting a hold on a credit card, or something else that's relatively straightforward. And we typically see that around sort of 50 to 80% of volume. So they can be informational things, they can be transactional things. The bulk of them are generally have some transactional nature. And then we're typically seeing that a smaller bundle be complex queries, which could be either informational or transactional. And so I think, identifying the sort of low-hanging fruit, the repetitive routine things that can be addressed, is sort of the key exercise, whether you're doing it for an end user facing customer service use case or an internal use case.
Fair enough. Zach, are you seeing similar or any?
I think both descriptions are really good, and we definitely do see some similar trends in that. I think that one of the major aspects that comes in when we're talking about financial technologies or financial institutions in general is security. And I think anybody on this call would agree with me on this. And that being the primary concern, the security of our clients and their information is paramount. And so our interest in pursuing a lot of these technologies and a lot of the types of interactions possible through these technologies often has to reckon with how safe some of these tools are, where data goes during these different processes, and finding ways to use those tools safely. So in terms of internal tools and versus client-facing tools and capabilities, there's some difference depending on what type of thing we're looking at in terms of what is and what is not available, because if we're operating internally, we tend to be operating in a safer environment day to day. But once client interactions are involved, we have to consider that the top priority. And so a lot of our interactions right now, and you'll see this if you look at the Nomi chatbot, which I know you've mentioned, a lot of it has to do with those complex queries about providing clients insight to their own information, but in a way that is ideal for that conversational interface. So, I mean, for example, visually speaking, a picture is in fact worth 1,000 words or more. There's a lot of information density that comes out through imagery. But in terms of information inputting, imagery, at least before vision intelligence or image intelligence gets kind of pulled into the mix, isn't something that is easy to input. Whereas conversation allows for a lot of nuance, a lot of word choice, but also a lot of layers behind context and empathy that allow for the reasoning behind questions to become apparent, which means that if I'm asking a relatively, what we would consider human to human, straightforward question like, why is my billing cycle so messed up? A computer might have difficulty understanding that, but a conversational interaction is built to understand and break down that type of request and facilitate an understanding of that. So there are some huge gains that can be made in terms of taking what clients are feeling, what they're experiencing, good or difficult, and translating that to answers. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of our transactions happen right now.
Figuring out the folks' intents and getting directly to that. That's important. That was one of the areas I was wondering about, the privacy, security, authentication. How do you do that, especially in a voice one, like say the Alexa skill? I mean, Angela, you mentioned you guys have an Alexa skill for trading. Like, how is there some account linking or?
Yeah, so we have a PIN that's set up, and the authentication on all of our agents, either voice or text, goes through our login pages, and for Asia we have two-factor auth. So it's a combination of what the channel is, right? So if it's visual or aka text, then we do the two-factor auth, and then for voice we have PIN. But the clients know that they have to set their PIN and et cetera.
Yeah, fair enough. So one of the things that's interesting is because you're working with folks in Asia, and Jake, you mentioned you have some clients in Europe and Latin America. Are you seeing different use cases in, say, like North America versus Europe, Latin America, Asia, of how people, what folks are trying to do with the banking chatbots, or what they want to do with them? Any differences?
Do you want to jump in first, Angela? Or I can share a couple of.
Yeah.
So I think that probably the biggest difference for us has been the willingness of users to use third-party channels to do instead of to use bank-owned channels. So in North America, most of our customers, most of the banks and credit unions that we work with, they already have pretty good adoption of online banking and mobile banking channels. So that's where all their customers already spend most of their time. Whereas we have in Central America, for example, a deployment into WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger that is very, very successful. It's relatively simple use case, but it provides access through WhatsApp to basic day-to-day banking, which is something that they just simply didn't offer before. So I think the option for, and I know in parts of Asia, we're light years ahead of this as well. So I think the ability to embed banking into third-party channels is really interesting, probably outside of North America. I'm not sure, sounds like you both have some experience with third-party channels. I'm not sure in our customer base that we've seen, we were very early into Facebook Messenger with a bank in Canada, but I think adoption was a very big challenge. There's a lot of security challenges around it. So we haven't really seen that take off. The end user demand take off is where we thought it might take off, 3 or 4 years ago when there was a lot of hype around this. So I'm sure there's a different experience in Asia, though. I know there is.
I'm sorry to jump in. I think you're right. The expectation of the market is so different, right, in Asia and Latin America. I'm Latin American, and so I use WhatsApp with my family there, and I can't tell you how many times I've been like, why can't this bank have an app? And those things just don't exist in that market. And and in a weird way, I think, of course, you probably see this in more detail, but it's expected in a weird way. And so when it shows up in WhatsApp, it's not so weird or scary, versus here in the US. I think there is a little bit more hesitance because of security and privacy, but we already have a mobile app. Why do I need to, how does this adoption really how is it valuable for me as a user? And in Asia, in the same way, cash is obsolete, so I think it really does have to do with the market, customer sentiment on how they will be willing to adopt the different functions that we can provide through conversational AI.
So perhaps using the channels that the customers are already used to.
Exactly.
That kind of idea, or go where they are.
Yeah.
That makes sense. If any of you are involved in, say, having the chatbots escalate up to human agents, maybe I should ask that differently, is do you involve human agents in these chat experiences? Or do you think that's a good idea?
I can jump in on this a little bit. I'm lucky enough to be working with another business unit that manages a lot of this type of interaction traditionally, the human agent helping out clients. And we're working on a joint project right now to better understand that, let's say, that flow. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but to understand that flow and places where we can help the human agent there. I think personally that it is absolutely valuable to have a human in the loop for several reasons. And I use that expression very specifically because human in the loop is something we use to describe both a person who is part of the client journey, but also from a machine learning perspective, which a lot of these conversational platforms are designed on, it's often used to help validate the machine and improve it. And so there's so much value that comes from having really brilliant people who work with clients or work with other people in the business on a daily, hourly, by the minute basis, because they provide the basis of knowledge and expertise that effectively we try to express as an additive solution to them through these chatbots or these voice interfaces. Effectively, these things are only meant to assist them in their job of working with the clients. And if that means that these tools can help clients better find the information they're looking for or get in touch with the right person, it means that the time that our humans spend is significantly more valuable.
Oh, we might have just lost Zach.
Oh.
We've run into the perennial Zoom challenge, which is a feature of all of our lives a little bit more these days.
Right. How about you? Maybe yeah, Jake or Angela, how do you involve humans in the in these channels?
Do you want to go? Do you want me to go?
Yeah, I can jump in. I mean,
I
for us,
don't want to interrupt you.
I think you know, I can build on the Zachary's point, but I would say, you know, in our deployments, we're always there as a complement to the support team, as an assistant to the support team. So our job, the job of the bots that we deploy, is to handle repetitive, low complexity tasks that take up most of the agent's time and free them up to deal with the more complex issues. And so when we can't resolve a problem for the customer, you know, we want to make sure that we can hand over seamlessly, we can pass that user seamlessly over to the agent. We want to make sure they go to the right agent. So there's a smart routing component of the product. And our goal is to reduce the amount of time that it takes to get to first contact resolution, reduce the amount of time that users are waiting. So I think, the other point was just there's a lot of feedback and data that can be gathered through that process of having human agents sort of take over from the bot and then provide feedback back to the bot that we can use to train our models. That's also a sort of secondary benefit of the process. But I think that the interplay between bots and humans is fundamentally important to this sort of product.
It's, yeah, helping the folks get an answer in an efficient way.
I'm going to actually add on to that in the other side of it, right? So when I started the bot integrations, it was with human live agents providing support, right, to the bot itself, or when the bot couldn't answer, essentially getting routed to the right agent. But now we're looking at it more as how do we use the bot as a human additive so that live agents do that proactive outreach first, instead of waiting, we also wait for people to come to us, but instead of waiting for people to come to us. And that has helped our agents, our branch associates, right? You talk about COVID a lot, because now we don't have people coming into the branch, especially because COVID hit like Hong Kong and Singapore first. We don't have people coming into the branch, but we are able to have proactive messages to reach out to clients and try and answer their questions or try and help them through the process, through whatever process they're going through. And I think that changes the model a little bit, because now the live agent responds, says, hey, how can I help you on this problem? And then the bot can take over as soon as the human, the client, is ready to respond. And that kind of keeps the conversation going, and it starts to create that relationship with the person versus just getting the answer they need.
I like that proactive concept. Is it while someone is on, say, the banking website trying to do something, or is it you're looking at information, say, afterwards, and then send them a message like, hey, you know, you didn't get the info you needed, here it is?
We're using it through WhatsApp, and it's to, it usually happens after someone has engaged with us on a different channel, either through an account opening or through a form. And then if we know that they've hit a snag, because we can see that like they're on step number 5,000, I'm joking, but on step 10 of 30 or of 20, or question 10 of 20, then we can help them get through the process. WhatsApp has templates that you're allowed to use. I see Jake smiling, so he's very familiar with these, right? And they're really, really great, but you have to have certain things put in place, like opt-in, and people have to want to receive the message. Surprisingly, a lot of people check that box because they would rather communicate to them through WhatsApp than us email them or us call them, right? Because then they can come and handle it later.
Fair enough. Well, so one thing that was touched upon a little bit is when starting, I think Jake mentioned about some of this low-hanging fruit, the low complexity, high frequency tasks. Are there any tips that you all have for getting started? Like how do you know which use cases to start with, or training phrases for a use case? Are there tips you might have?
So I might be able to jump in a little bit on this.
Yeah.
So I think that the first question that you should ask, if you are a large institution looking to get into chatbots or voice bots, or more generally, you are just looking to break into the space a little bit, I think a big question will be, what are your customers asking now? What are the big pain points? And you know what, to Jake's point about FAQs, I agree. It's very easy to underperform with conversational experiences in those spaces. It's very easy to sort of think the FAQ, the way it's written, will translate perfectly to a conversational interaction, and it does not. I think everyone on this call can appreciate that it isn't a one-to-one. But breaking that down into those being the primary questions your clients might have, or the primary things they might be interested in understanding better, guides where you should start from a design perspective, I think. And from there, I'm actually going to reference some design guidance that I heard at a recent conference, I believe by Wally Brill, which was that generally speaking, the second place you should go after you have your core concept is your conversational interactions. Honestly, acting them out, mapping them out, having conversations from the perspective of a client or the perspective of the end user of one of these conversational systems helps you define the tone, the cadence, the different aspects of the conversation from the bot perspective that you want to be representing. And it also shows you what not to do. If you're having those demo or fake conversations and you hear something that you're like, you know what, that doesn't sound right, that doesn't translate well to this medium, or that doesn't seem like it represents the brand or the design, that's good. It gives you that opportunity to review it, work those scripts, so to speak. And the last thing would be do some actual homework on conversational design. It's and again, Jake pointed out, there's low-hanging fruit, but there's a difference between going after the low-hanging fruit well and just kind of saying like, oh, it's okay, I can make a chatbot work. Actually spend a little bit of time understanding conversational design, and you will be amazed at how much better or how much more performant your interaction is.
Fair enough. Jake, do you see a similar approach, or?
Yeah, I think I think there is a question of if you're going to start from the beginning. When we do this, we're typically looking at call logs, call log data, and chat log data if you already have live chat deployed. And then building out of that, building a real world data, building a picture of what people are asking about, how they're asking, and then trying to identify which answers we want to have. I think, one important factor is that the ability to understand natural language and the whole interface side of it is really just one part of the equation. Then the other part is, can you actually answer that customer's query? So if you ask for your balance, can I get your balance, as a simple example? And obviously you want to pick use cases that you can actually solve, because otherwise you're going to hand off to a human agent in any case. I think probably the other just thing to cover on is that what we've seen is the build time and effort extends into the operating time and effort. So we've seen people consistently underestimate the operating time and effort. AI is a lot about dealing with edge cases, and it's an endless, it's a sort of an endless task to get in and deal with edge cases. So I think for institutions, there's a question of how you step into this. Are you going to build and do it yourself? And then there's different vendors in the market, including ourselves, who offer products here where we've already done some of this work. So we can get you started, instead of at 0, we can get you started at 1 or 2 or down the line.
That's you mentioned some of we talked a little bit about some of the use cases. There's these low-hanging fruit ones. There's things like passwords. There's some transactions. There's efficient routing for live agents. How do banks measure success here? Like, what is it? Reducing escalations? Like, what's the overall goal for having these chatbots or voice experiences?
So I'm gonna just jump in. I think some of our goals are gonna be similar. So I'm gonna look at it more from the perspective of what it is that you're going in to build this thing for in the first place, right? I feel that our goals should always be aligned at the very beginning. We have to have that clear in our mind as we're creating the bot or the product. And so, for example, and I'm sure Jake, you have this very true for like Latin America. What it's trying to do in those instances is going to be very different than what it's doing in the US versus what it's doing in Hong Kong, right? So for me, of course, there's going to be the simple goal of containment, right? Like how many conversations stay within the AI. That's something we all measure. How many return users we have, or how many times do people come back and ask us for help. Something that I measure on WeChat is how does it cross-pollinate across the different WeChat ecosystem, but that's because WeChat is like one whole little monster on its own, and everything can be measured inside its little monster. And so, each bot and each implementation should have a goal in mind, and then we measure against that. And outside of the usual, monthly active users and containment rates, I think I also measure things like are people becoming more financially literate, and I measure that by seeing how many financial literacy type questions or education type questions they ask, right? Because that's one of our goals. How many accounts get opened? How do we help with transactions? And then on the flip side of measurement is how do associates perform against the bot, right? Like, are they able to answer questions? Are they able to provide customer service? And how are they performing? And how is the bot performing to provide the ultimate client experience?
How about you, Jake? Similar types
Yeah,
of
well, we worked quite closely on some of this stuff in the past, and so maybe I can throw something out to the group here. But one key metric we measure and we see very widely used in the industry is containment. But containment has a big challenge in it, which is containment counts as success if the bot did a good job and resolved a query, and if the bot did a terrible job and the user abandons. So, for example, we have a deployment in Europe. We have 100% containment. It's because it's impossible to hand off to a human. So we've been looking to dig into. So containment can be very easily gamed as a metric, and we've been looking to dig into and break that out within containment. So if we look at first contact resolution, how much of that was good, we actually resolved the problem, how much of that was just abandoned, and then even in the good bucket there's or in the abandoned bucket there's abandoned because we didn't understand, or abandoned because we didn't have the right answer, or some other challenge. So I think we've been trying to, and it's not a solved problem, I would say, but we've been trying to dig in and really understand containment very deeply at the individual sort of user goal level. We continue to work on that and struggle with it on a daily basis, and we've had lots of discussions around this as well. But I don't know if anybody else has a silver bullet there for us, but love it.
Yeah, it's funny when you mentioned there's another a high tech company I was chatting about with this, and they said the same thing. You could optimize for containment at the detriment of the user experience, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. But so they were trying to see, did they get the user past whatever they were stuck, or did they help them solve whatever their problem is? So they try to figure out how they could measure that if possible.
I think, if I may, I think a lot of it comes down to intent management. Art, you circled on this a little bit earlier, but being able to recognize the intention of a client. And I'm just talking about a client-facing use case, just for the sake of simplicity. Being able to determine the intent and then measure against that as a goal is another metric that I know we play with a fair bit, because it serves as a more complete picture of whether or not we are actually meeting expectation with our clients. It's, do they get into the flow? Do we manage it? Do we manage to hand it off to a human? Is it necessary to hand it off to a human? And that question really comes down to, well, what is it they wanted? And can we, on a case-by-case basis, but in an automated fashion, assess what they wanted reliably? And then there's elements of that too, which say, and again, this is kind of back to the human in the loop thing, but you won't know that unless you have people go through the interactions every once in a while and assess, how are the bots doing? Are they predicting intents correctly? Are our intents that we provided the bot with granular enough for what clients are asking? Or can we go more granular? Can we get into more specifics to better understand where problems are coming from? And I think that in itself lends to the bigger metrics for the wider business, which is, can we identify problem areas? Can we identify good areas with confidence in a way that scales with the business? I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of these financial institutions are enormous enterprises with millions of customers, and being able to scale our assessment of how we're doing in a very real sense, in a very customer tangible sense, requires automated solutions that scale with them, and ideally automated solutions that provide that insight to our human agents as well, so that they can operate with more insight.
Yeah, definitely. So they're more efficient as well. So I guess a related question to this is, how are financial institutions generating awareness that these automated solutions exist? Like, I know you mentioned, like, Angela's using WhatsApp, you also have voice. Like, how do folks, the end users, know it even is an option there?
Well, if you guys don't mind, I can take a short stab at this one. I think that generally speaking, it depends on the modality. To use Angela's wording, which I agree with completely. It depends very much on the modality. If it's something like Nomi, which exists for RBC, which exists in tangent with our application, our mobile app, then that actually makes it quite simple. Because we control that environment, so to speak, and we can surface capabilities as they come up through a user's operation of the system, or through their journey. If, for example, they're spending against savings, which they've indicated that they want to create, then it's quite possible to pop up that type of thing and say, oh, by the way, if you have questions about this, you could look for it here, or we can actually have a conversation about it, or I can sort of escalate you to whoever you need to talk to. We find that's a really helpful experience, but that is pre-dependent on needing to control the environment. In a less controlled environment like web, a lot of the time it's making people aware. In a broader sense, though, it's often in educating the market, if we want to get into those terms, but educating the client base on what tools are available to them and on what channels they are available, be it mobile, be it on a telephony line, and it could be talking to an advice center, or it could be actually getting technical questions answered. Making those things apparent is part of educating our market and educating our clients, but more broadly, making it known that these technologies not only exist, but we're leveraging them. And as frank as it may be, conversations like this that get out to people who use financial services, it spreads awareness that these tools not only exist, but can actually make your interaction with these companies better. And we love being able to share that. But I'm gonna yield my time now. Please, Angela, what do you think?
I agree with you on the education component. I think it's literally. Have you ever tried to put sprinkles on an ice cream cone and then the sprinkles go everywhere, and like you can't just not make a mess? It's doing that. You literally have to sprinkle it everywhere you can. So that people are informed about where and how they can communicate with you. And you're all going to go and have ice cream now. And so it's so important to also be patient, right? Like no one's going to all of a sudden, your millions of clients are not going to come and ram down your door as soon as you put your link out there, right? I think that's something to remember. It takes a lot of time for people to not only become aware, read the email, see it in social media, see it on your website. I mean, like literally sprinkling it everywhere. And so the combination of educating clients and being patient to both wait for them to come, and then making it easy for them to adopt you. So that means your links and your actual touch points should be very easy for them to add you to their contact lists or wherever their defaults are. If it's an embedded chat, it's a whole different thing, right? Like then you have the opportunity to prompt them when you need. Yeah. And then I think for voice, with Alexa skills, I think it's a little harder because people have to practically go and add it. It's not as easy as, clicking a link on a website or tapping on a button on your phone. So I think that one's always a little bit more challenging, and that one I think we need more. That's more of a human touch thing. And then cross-marketing, right? And going back to you want to make sure that you're cross-marketing across your different channels to make sure that people know. And then a word of caution. Yeah. Just because you have a lot of different ways to do it doesn't mean you have to do all of them, right? I think that's a word of caution for those listening.
How about Jake? How are you helping your customers
Yeah,
generate awareness?
if
Yeah.
I can,
Yeah.
so I think there's certainly an awareness challenge, although that challenge is largely solved if you're in existing channels, which is certainly why in North America, at least, we've seen existing channels, web and mobile, be the primary places that we've deployed bots to start with. I think one of the most important things that we can do, and one of the things we see consistently sort of missed, is really good expectation settings with users. Poor expectation setting, somebody comes in, they write a long essay, it's about something the bot can't help with, and they have a bad experience. I think good expectation setting, and this applies to how you market out to customers, how you do your the page that links to the bot or whatever, the intro messages, your error handling messages. I think these all relate to error handling. But if you can focus on a few killer use cases and deliver a little bit of delight early out of the gate, and set expectations so that people know what they can do effectively within the bot and start to build that relationship. I think that's a key part of marketing outside of purely awareness, which is obviously a big challenge. So just as an example, we have this bot deployed in Central America and into WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger, and we see over 90% first contact resolution. So it has a couple of really killer use cases that Bank has done a very effective job of getting people to know what they are, and people come back repeatedly and primarily use the bot for a small number of really killer use cases. So I think that's a good place to start when you're marketing any product like this.
It's one of the biggest points is what you just talked about, is letting people know what the chatbot can actually do, and then handling those, like covering those unhandled cases or mishandled cases, trying to get folks back. Sometimes you hear on the happy path, right? Like that goes a long way. Maybe just one final question before we wrap up is just real quick. Do you guys have any thoughts on where the future is going with banking chatbots? Like what do you see want to happen, or what do you think is going to happen in the short term? And maybe Jake, yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think we've seen and we have RBC on the phone, so we can mention them, but no longer the biggest company in Canada. Now Shopify is the biggest company in Canada. I think what we've seen happen off the back of COVID is 5 to 10 years of digital adoption happen in the course of 3 to 6 months, just as 5 to 10 years of digital adoption in e-commerce happened in a very short period of time. So I think banks need to be able to provide personalized service to customers with digital scale. Chatbots are a very good product within a whole bunch of other mix of products that can deliver on that promise. I think we still have a ways to go as an industry to figure out how to deliver really good experiences versus just getting things out the door. And then, I think kudos I think we have a few sort of leading lights in the industry, and I think Nomi's a great product. I'm in Canada, so I've had the chance to use it, but it's a great product in helping to build sort of insights-driven experiences. I think there's a service side to it and a sort of insights-led side, and I'm sure the two will come together and ultimately I think that's where the real power in this sort of experience lies.
How about Angela and Zach, any final thoughts of the future?
I think in the short term, I love what you say, Jake, about how we've really just transformed our adoption in the last 3 to 6 months. I think it's important for us to be able to continue to knit all of the pieces into the conversational space, right? I mean, a lot of the use cases we've talked about are things like, what's my balance, or how can I execute a trade, or I have a question about this thing that I don't understand what this means. I think it's starting to knit together the rest of the processes that are more complex, that are no longer that hanging fruit, and that provide value and reduce human waste time, right? One of the favorite questions that I like to ask my associates when we're spinning something up that's new is, I ask them those, like, what is the thing that you hate doing that you do the most? Like but you have to do it because no one else can do it, and it's just really annoying, right? So how do we start to be able to integrate in those kinds of processes into the conversational space, not necessarily meaning that the conversational agent has to solve the problem. It might just send you to the right place, but now it can, right? It's connecting in real-time data, which we all already do, but doing it in a way that it can complete more complex processes that help people. And then the other thing is, I think, from a financial services perspective, it's being able to continue to educate and help people be smarter about what they're doing with their financial future. I know that's definitely one of TD Ameritrade's motto, right? We want to transform lives for the better, but I really think that as an industry, that's something that we have the ability to do, and we do it, and we can do it in conversation because it's so accessible and it's so communicative, and we can break it down in simpler terms than, you know, a 500-word essay on what this financial metric means. So I think that's a responsibility for the future.
Any final thoughts, Zach, for you? Yeah.
I think that generally speaking, I have sort of two ways of answering this question. One is definitely focused on the business side of this question. What is next, or what is upcoming for these technologies in the business sense, in the pragmatic sense? And then the other is from a technology perspective. Where can we go next with these tools? And I've been lucky enough to be on a team well situated for both of those questions, because we get to see some of these up and coming things long before they're necessarily implemented. I'd say from the business perspective first, that I agree with Angela completely. I think that the marrying of different channels and the tying of these different threads together is the next major step. And to Jake's point, I think that that's going to include better ways, or involve better ways, to connect between, let's say, client-derived insights and leveraging knowledge of, let's say, service-based knowledge. And that could be leveraging our advisors' experience, or leveraging some of the internal tooling of the institution to provide better insights, better guidance on how to save, how to invest, how to expand your funds, how to all levels of your financial life, how to interact in a way that effectively supports you and supports the community around you as best as possible. And I think that what we're going to be seeing is much more of those very clean, in many ways, ideally seamless interactions between different channels, which leads me to the technical side of things. I think that technically, what we're going to be seeing in the near future is a bigger dive, a deeper dive into not only this omni-channel experience, but within that, leveraging of data on a scale that allows us to understand and interpret what client needs as they're having those needs, as they're going about their day, their financial day. And even beyond that, being able to interpret and leverage empathy as part of conversational interaction is going to be an incredibly useful tool in technology. And that goes beyond financial institutions, but I think that in chat, and especially in voice, where prosody can actually give a lot of that insight, we're going to be seeing more and more use of technology in this space that actually understands what you as the user are experiencing, what you're trying to find. And ideally doing away with those days where we might say, you know, hey, my phone, I need help with X, and they ask, and it responds with the weather or a funny joke, where it'll actually respond and understand what you're looking for. And if you're exasperated that it's telling you a joke, it'll be like, you know what, my bad, I probably misunderstood you, let's talk about what I did wrong. Those next steps technically are exciting because they open up the floodgates to so much more to come, and so much that now is difficult to build or difficult to capture in a way that is not clunky, will become easier. And we're seeing some of those changes already. So I'm for one, really excited for what this space holds.
Yeah, this is great. That's a great, me too. I'm definitely excited by what's going to come. I appreciate you guys doing this. Sorry, it looks like we're running over a little bit here, but I appreciate you taking the time to do this. It was great having all you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you very much.
It's great meeting you, gentlemen.
You too,
Yeah.
very much.
Great to meet. All the best.